Hi, I'm Joe Flonick, American Business Software. I'm here to talk about customizing your software. I'm going to try to break this into 4 parts. The first part basically is just a little bit an overview of the industry and how the software industry is constructed. The second part I'd like to do is introduce you to our company, American Business Software. Then the third part is to try to tell you how we go about handling customization. And the last part is to discuss what you will see in the overall marketplace out there. So we'll start here. Software market. The custom high-end stuff, that's where the SAPs of the world live. That's basically very expensive software. We're talking typically in the millions of dollars, and it's typically millions more in terms of support. Most people here are certainly not going to be in that category, so I'm going to kind of skip by that, but that certainly is a segment of the market. The next part we'll call in-house software that's developed in-house. And a lot of times, years ago, more companies had in-house people that developed software in-house and had their own IT staff. And a lot of that's being phased out, and a lot of the software that was developed in-house is now being replaced by more industry-specific software. The last part, anything that really doesn't fall into one of those first 2 categories is really in what I call the out-of-the-box software. To a great extent, virtually all the software that includes general purpose or industry-specific software, it's pretty much out of the box. The negative is that it's very difficult in most cases to be able to match exactly to your business needs. So like now, the second part here is to try to introduce you to our company. And our company's name is American Business Software, and our product name is called FloorPro 3 ERP. ERP is a big buzzword, enterprise resource planning, but basically what it is fully soup to nuts, everything from order entry to invoicing, and we've been doing this for 35 years, so we certainly, I think, have a good handle on what it takes to install a software in any flooring store, distributor. The one thing about industry-specific software is the units of measure are different. If you take out-of-the-box software, most do not understand things like cartons and pieces and square foot. So for example, if you have a carton of tile, the carton of tile, let's say, is billed by the square foot. Let's say it's ordered by the square foot. Let's say it comes in a carton, which it typically does, and there's so many pieces per carton. So somebody orders it by the square foot. Now the supplier may be billing you in square meters. So one of the keys to industry-specific software is understanding all these various units of measure and having that propagate throughout all of the software within the system. The next part is die lots, run numbers. If you have ceramic tile and it's in one die lot number, you can't take a second die lot number and make it work on the same wall. It's going to be very obvious that it's not the same die lot and it doesn't match. The next part is to break cartons. In some products, you may want to break cartons. Let's say it's Listellos or Decos or whatever. And then let's say it's field tile, and you don't want to break cartons. So our software understands that's the basics of when we're talking about industry-specific software. And again, when you're getting involved in inventory control, most systems are not going to be able to handle any of those things. So, next slide here. So a little bit about our product. I'm going to enumerate some of the things here, and then I'm going to go back and highlight 4 things. We basically do the order entry, the quotes, the confirmations, point of sale, inventory control, invoicing, purchasing, receiving, warehouse management, accounts receivable, sales analysis, pricing, commissions, etc. So the 4 things that I'd like to go back and enumerate are the inventory control. And again, we talked about that briefly, the fact that we can handle die lots and run numbers and conversion factors. That's very important. The second part I'd like to highlight is warehouse management. We actually have an integrated warehouse management system that operates both in the front and the back of the system. For example, if someone placed an order for a specific SKU and they bought it from a specific run number, you might want to be able to see what run numbers it came from, because you might very well be trying to match that same identical die lot. So we have the ability of automatically telling the person that takes the order, by the way, this is the run number that they last ordered it from, and we can replicate that and tell them that. So it's important to have that information at the front end, because if you're depending on a warehouse management system at the rear end, it's not going to necessarily know that you're trying to match a specific die lot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Purchasing is the third thing here. And basically the system does understand virtually any kind of purchasing mechanism that you would normally associate with it. Minimums and maximums and reorder points and all kinds of different mathematical algorithms and trends, et cetera. So we do try to help you in terms of those various aspects of the system. Last I will say is that virtually everything these days is emailed, so I will say that virtually every document is really not printed. It's either emailed, so let's say it's an invoice or a quote or whatever, or a statement. In fact, actually, these days it seems like a lot of times when you send out a statement, they want every copy of the invoice along with it, along with signatures. So if you're doing that in a PDF, that's not hard at all because it's just a big PDF. But you certainly want to print a lot of that stuff. So anyway, that's the points that I want to highlight. I wanted to talk about some additional things that we do. And I guess this first point, credit card integration, probably a better term for that would be payment integration. One of the common methods is if you come to the order desk and you type in something, we tell them what the order number is and it appears on, right now we're using Verifone primarily. But in other cases, they might send out a link. It might be an ACH payment. It might be a credit card payment that's paid online. And we actually take all those through the processing and we actually basically post it directly to the account. So we do have credit card integration. We have signature capture. What that is let's say, for example, you do have receivables, you have an on-account customer, and you want them to sign for it. There's a thing that they can click at order entry, and they can tell them, oh, by the way, I want you to sign for it, and they type in the person's name, and then they just sign for it on the signature pad. Barcoding, not to get into any commercial grade barcoding, but we handle all the commercial grade stuff. But more often than not these days, people are more interested in QR codes because they're cheap, they're inexpensive. Basically, you go over and get a box of Avery labels, 500 Avery labels, and it's maybe $5. E-commerce, we have the ability of taking orders directly from customers. Anybody that has internet access and a web browser can place orders, check stock. But again, that's controlled by you. We also integrate with certain other e-commerce platforms too as well. I'm just going to mention accounts payable and general ledger, but that's customization. Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about how we customize. First of all, we treat our customers as partners because to us, their success is our success. So we're kind of doing this as a complete unit. We want to make sure that they're successful, so we're not going to start out by telling you a whole bunch of different things and then piecemeal each one of these things and nickel dime you for everything. What we're going to do is we're going to tell you up front, here's what the cost is, here's all the various things that you need. So why do companies computerize to begin with? Well, it's automation. They want to do things faster with fewer mistakes. Automation just doesn't call out sick. It helps companies do more, faster, cheaper, and with fewer people. And I will admit that in the software industry, a lot of people have lost flexibility. They basically use this term best practices, and I'm not going to try to minimize that there are no best practices. Certainly there are some best practices. But to a great extent, it means this is how my software works, so I want you to change your business practices to match the way that my software works. So a lot of things that we do in terms of tweaks really basically is relatively minor stuff. It could be adding a screen, could be subtracting a screen, it could be changing the way something defaults for a specific user, for one specific operator, one location, one company, one branch. It could be for multiple users, it could be for groups of people. So that's a lot of the stuff that we do are relatively minor. So jumping, and that's really what I'm calling a tweak, something that's relatively minor. A lot of the things really are security based because basically people want to control what people can do, people can see, especially when you're into what we call a full ERP system. You definitely don't want anybody involved in the general ledger side of the house unless they have authorization to see P&Ls and balance sheets, et cetera. So we basically give a user an individual security level for every level of the system that they're in. And then within that, each individual program has a separate security level, and within that, we determine which items they can and can't do within a given program. So it's a very detailed security level scheme. Custom programming, we're probably one of the few companies left that's still willing to do any custom programming. We basically, a lot of times, will take a look at things, and if it adds value to our product, we will do it certainly at a reduced price, and then basically add it to our product. So if you're looking for something and you say, well, gee, this is a better way of doing it, we want to make this package as fine-tuned to your business as we can make it. So we will always do custom programming. And again, I'm not going to say that all of it's free, but certainly if it adds value, the more likely that it adds value, the more likely it is it's going to be very inexpensive. So let me emphasize again, American Business Software, it's very important that we're not using something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on called an API. We basically own the software. We do all the tweaks. We do the custom programming ourselves. So the next part I'm going to say is who do you call? This is a typical problem. You have a problem, you say, who do I call? Well, certainly we're installed in 4 different countries, and I will say that our support team is all US based, and everyone you talk to is in the United States. So who do you call for help? Well, certainly if it's something specific to your company, we probably won't be able to help you. But if it's something related to some things that you have an idea, something that you might want to do, give us a call, and we want to certainly know about it. We want to certainly be your first point of contact. We want to be able to help you if there's any way that we can. So is it possible is a lot of questions that we have. Is it possible to do so-and-so? Well, a lot of times it could be something very simple that we can give you a 5-minute answer for and direct you right in the right path. People don't want to spend a lot of time going through documentation the way they once did years ago. And we do understand these days that most people don't have IT staffs. We understand that. So we try to compensate for that, and we try to provide you the IT support and help that you need. So the most common tweaks that we make really deal with operational workflow changes. And now, for example, is the purchasing done at the front end? Is it done in the back of the house? Is it done in the back office? Do you have a separate purchasing department? That's a typical tweak or change that we're going to make as a result of the way that your company operates. Inventory management is another example. And one of the examples that I give a lot of times is this weedy shower. It's a shower pan and a drain. Well, what happens is in the warehouse, they have to ship the shower pan and drain separately. So it's 2 different boxes. The warehouse has to know, I have to pick this box and that box and send it out. So we handle we try to help people understand how they can handle that inventory better. Another one deals with kits. They may have a sample board of 20 different tiles. So they have to put all those together by taking pieces from various different pieces of tile. So we want to work with you. We want to solve your problem. We want to make this as fine-tuned as we can to match your business needs, and we want to make sure that it's streamlined to your way of doing things. Integration with other software. We have integrated with lots of different software packages. Probably the most common ones are Shopify, Wayfair, WordPress, and the floor covering B2B. Now, WordPress is probably a word that you might not have heard of before, but that if you go out and find out that most internet sites, the bottom line is that they're actually using something called WordPress to actually do the internet, do their internet access. So we do integrate with WordPress. Complete software package, again, just to reiterate, we try to do white glove service and support. We treat everything as a partnership. We are industry specific. We do have industry knowledge. We've been doing it for 35 years. We do tweaks, custom programming. We don't nickel dime you. You can access it from anywhere in the world. Software a la carte. This is a little bit more now along the lines of what you can expect out when you go to look for software. Most software these days is sold via cloud service. And really, in essence, what happens is they're not installing it on your local PC, but they're actually installing it in a cloud somewhere, and you're accessing it via cloud. So normally it's going to be an ongoing monthly charge. Now, support, they're typically going to give you very minimal support for that. And if you have any detailed support questions, a lot of times they're going to charge you extra for that. Installation, they're going to charge you extra for that. That's not included at all. Training, that's typically not included either. And typically there's going to be a charge by the number of users. So again, the software is sold as a service, and everything is basically being purchased a la carte. So just to kind of reiterate a little bit, when you're going back to try to calculate a complete cost, just remember that there's a monthly charge, there's a support, there's installation, there's training. Is there pricing by the user? Can you customize? Can you integrate with any other software? There's a car commercial that says only pay for what you need, and I've seen that commercial about 5,000 times. But actually there is a price that you pay for that. If you actually know up front basically what you need and you build that in, it actually is a lot cheaper than paying all the a la carte prices. People don't tell you that, but that is the case. So we have a tendency to include anything and everything that we think you need up front, so we're not going to come back and nickel dime you for everything. Target market, again, I'm going to just break software into a generic marketplace and industry-specific software. Generic software is the most common way that most companies start out. Most likely, it will not fit the specific needs of this industry once you get involved in inventory. So if you're doing inventory, it probably isn't going to handle any of your needs, and you're going to have to do a lot of workaround. So I would not recommend trying to do a lot of changes to any kind of any generic software. I would recommend starting with software that more closely represents what you want the software to do to begin with, direct out of the box. So, let's see. I'm going to give you some additional software considerations here. Sometimes these are things that other people are concerned with. They're concerned with remote access, internet access, with the ability of handling things from remote phones, etc. They're interested in cybersecurity, cloud-based security. And again, I would also make sure that you know whether it's generic or whether it's industry-specific software. Okay, now let's talk about how software modifications are made. If, just like Coke and Pepsi, they're not going to give out what their secret sauce is. So what is the secret sauce when we're talking about software? It's called source code. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of what source code is, but just think of it as the blueprints to the program. Without those blueprints, you really can't change that program really pretty much in any way. So now, if you are like a lot of people, if you're a big, large company and you're QuickBooks or your Microsoft Dynamics or your Oracle or any of these other big, large players, how do you allow resellers to modify the software? What do you do? Well, there's a lot of different names for it, but that first line on that slide, API, it is basically that. It's an application program interface. Now again, it's going to be called 100 different things. You probably won't even have heard that term, but I'm going to stick to that because that is the real legitimate technical term for it. Now on the positive side, typically an API will allow you to make an awful lot of changes that you may very want to make. The negative is that it does typically require a programmer. It can be time consuming and it virtually always costs more than the original estimate. Certainly, if you ever had a house built, you know how that works. So everything is an add-on at some point. Now, the real underlying problem that I found with most of this is people don't define the problem. So one person's view of what a word means and another person's view of what that same word means are two different things, and so you really aren't talking the same thing. So it ends up dragging the project into a lot longer and more detailed and more expensive than you ever thought that it would. So the key there is to know who owns the software, because if the company owns the software, then they're probably not using an API, and most of the software these days, the changes will be made via an API. If you're buying direct from the company that owns the software, obviously you're dealing directly with the people that developed it. They can make the changes directly for you. In our case, we are the developer, we own it, and we incorporate the changes directly into our software. In terms of customization, I would stay away from generic software if you're interested in doing anything with inventory. And the reason is because it's just not going to handle the square foot carton piece conversions and the square meter conversions. It's just not going to simply do it. So I wouldn't think about getting involved in inventory if you're talking about any kind of generic software. So as we discussed earlier, you can use an API to make a lot of these changes, but I would not invest a lot in generic software with these API type functions. So I guess the critical thing is who owns the software, who can actually make those changes. So again, if you're dealing with the original manufacturer of that software, they can make the changes for you, and it's the most likely way that it's the more efficient way of doing it. The negatives of API is that when the vendor changes their software, they no longer support that version anymore. They force you onto a new version, reducing the support for the old one. Now that you're forced to use the new version, you have to make all those changes all over again for a second time. So that becomes time consuming and expensive again. And then the other thing is the cost is typically always far more than what you think. So anyway, so I would select software that more closely matches your business needs. So best practices, I understand people use best practices over and over again, but we want to match that software product as best as we can to our customer base. I guess that's the end of the presentation here. If anybody has any questions, I'm sure happy to answer them. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Joe Flanagan, American Business Software. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.